The magnitude of this decision uh, was and is huge. We want to make sure that we are protecting the integrity of our playoffs as well as our championship when we get to Phoenix. We want them to be able to race hard. That's what our sport has been about for 75 plus years. But we also want them to understand, and I believe that each and every one of them understands that this crossed the line.
Austin Dillon keeps his win at Richmond from last weekend, but he loses playoff eligibility. NASCAR announcing that they've taken the playoff eligibility that goes with the victory away from Austin Dillon and the number 3 team at Richard Childress Racing, among other things that they announced in regards to penalties with Dillon's actions on the last lap at Richmond. Jeff, we've seen it, we've heard it. You were there Sunday night. What's your reaction to what NASCAR announced today in terms of penalties to Austin Dillon and the number 3 team?
Yeah, Dustin, I think this is, it's a difficult situation, right? I mean, this system that we have, not only in how you make the playoffs and how you transfer through the playoffs and how you win a championship, but also when you put that in context with what it means for how you get paid next year, how you get paid this year. This is a massive decision because it just is, and this system puts drivers in the position to do things like this. It's puts them in the situation where they have to do things that they're uncomfortable with. And so then that requires NASCAR to police it. And it requires them, in my eyes, in a way more than ever in the history of the sport, to draw the lines. And clearly, I think, when you watch all that, I have sympathy for Austin because he's out there trying to win a race. He's out there trying to get himself in the playoffs. He's out there doing everything that you ask your race car driver to do as a car owner. It was over the line. And I think everybody that watched it, well, not everybody because nobody agrees on everything, but I'd say the majority of people that watched it said, okay, if this isn't over the line, then what is, right? What is over the line? And and then NASCAR has, they got to take a step back and they have, to look at all the data. They have to look at all the information. And, when they looked at it, they're like, look, in totality, all of these things together, it wasn't just the 22, it wasn't just the 11, it was those two things together. And Spider was on the radio, he was saying wreck him, all that stuff collectively, right, adds up. And so NASCAR made the decision, and I think they struggled with it. I think that the reason they struggled with it is because, not only are you penalizing Richard Childress Racing and Austin Dillon, you're affecting the entire field, and you're affecting a lot of things. So you have to get it right. And at the end of the day, I think they got it right. But I also have sympathy for Austin Dillon and his team. Two things can be true at the same time.
Elton Sawyer told us, the media, just not too long ago, he said the number one thing is that we want to make sure that we're protecting the integrity of our playoffs as well as the championship when we get to Phoenix. If you are a driver, after seeing this, and look, it's still because of this system, drivers, you do whatever it takes. Do drivers now understand where the line is? Or look, there's still Bristol on the horizon. There's still a couple road courses. There's still Martinsville. We know how chaotic Martinsville can be. And as Elton alluded to, Phoenix, the championship site, what could happen there? Do drivers understand what the line is now?
Well, the line is always, difficult to explain because unless NASCAR says if you make contact with someone and they wreck, you're going to be penalized. Unless they say that, or even if they did say that for that matter, because why did you hit? Maybe he lifted early and you didn't anticipate it, right? So, it's actually easier in other series because they police it at a higher level. That's not what NASCAR is. NASCAR, as Elton said after the race, has always been a contact sport. Some of the greatest moments in our sport's history where guys wrecking each other. And, so what is that line? And I think that we have these moments where, and this is certainly a big moment, what crosses the line and what is that? And so now, I think it's a little more clear for sure, but it's never going to be crystal clear. But the drivers need to know if there has to be a consequence, right? If you go over the line, and every driver looks at the line a little differently, right? And I'm sure Austin Dillon doesn't agree with this call, right? And there's a reason he's not an unreasonable person. There's a reason he won't agree with this call. But we have to have, in a chaotic world, which these drivers live in, we have to have some degree of what is acceptable. And I think it's easy to say that this was over the line, and then each driver will have to go and speak to NASCAR, and NASCAR has a all drivers meeting on Friday. And I promise you, this will be the topic of conversation.
It'll be the most well-attended meeting that they've had.
So look, it's Dustin, we've dealt with this for years, and we've wrestled with what's the right thing to do. And I will say this: in an era where safety has become more important, in an era where the drivers are put in more difficult situations because of the format and because of the rules and because of the processes with charters, all those things that put more pressure on the drivers. And that's awesome to watch. But at the same time, it's put them in positions where they do things that they're not always comfortable with. And I think in some ways it helps them be able to go to their car owner, go to their sponsors, go to their crew chief, go to their spotter and say, we can't do that. They're not going to let us do it. And because trust me, the pressure's there. The pressure, I heard it all the time. You don't wreck enough people. You're not aggressive enough. Well, hell, I didn't race in this. I didn't race like these guys have to race. It's more intense than when I raced. So I think giving them some borders and some guidelines is actually better for everybody. But unfortunately, there are times that the only way you know if you cross the line is if you see it. And you're like, okay, that crossed the line. Because how do you make a rule for that? How do you write a rule that says, hey, if you go in the corner, you hit a guy on purpose from 4 car lengths back or 2 car lengths back, he spins, and then you make contact with another car and he makes contact and you win the race, you're not going to win. I mean, how do you make that rule? So it's always going to be a bit of a judgment call. It's in the sport's best interest, though, to limit the amount of judgment. Limit it so that everybody knows it up front what's too much. And this call will help do that, but it's never going to go completely away.
Jeff, that's interesting what you say there, and it gets me thinking about, look, we look at other sports and how many times we, see other sports delayed or the end, we have to wait on the end because the officials have to determine, hey, did the player's foot on the line or was it not on the line or what, this or that. Here was a case where Sunday night, I think to a lot of people, the eye test would say, hey, there's probably something here. This was a penalty. This should have been reacted on at the moment. Instead, we wait 3 days until we get NASCAR's judgment. Now, understanding they went through SMT data, they went through the in-car camera footage, they listened to the team radio and stuff like that. I know Elton Sawyer did talk about they want to get to where they can make the decision a lot sooner. He stressed they feels like they got it right, but waiting 3 days as opposed to, it looked like the line was crossed pretty evidently on Sunday night. Was NASCAR right into waiting this long on this decision?
We all would rather the decision be instant and have it on Sunday night. I think everybody would rather have that, but I would rather take time and them have the opportunity to make sure they get it right. This is monumental call. This is huge. And it's not just huge for Austin Dillon and Richard Childress. It's huge for the whole industry. And so, I think that Elton and as you know, I work with Elton and that team a lot. I would rather wait and have a conversation than rush it. Now that this call is made, maybe the next decision comes a little quicker, right? And there were other, we've had, this isn't unheard of by any means for a decision to come out on a Wednesday. Normally it's a Tuesday, right? But
this was a time
it's
where
not unheard of by any means.
This was a time where it used to be like that, and then the sport tried to get away from it because everybody was complaining, hey, let's find out what happened Sunday night after the race Saturday night, as opposed to waiting until Tuesday, Wednesday. So this is going back to that. That's why I just brought that up.
It's the smaller issue. It is a bit of an issue. I think the fans want immediate response. They want immediate reaction, for sure. And they want to leave the racetrack knowing, but again, that's in a perfect world. I'm not going to fault NASCAR for taking the time to get it right. I'm not going to do that. I think that it's better to try to get it right and look at all the information and all the data and everything. Talk to everybody and listen to everybody, and then make a decision. This is a monumental moment. Let's treat it like that, and I'm okay with taking some time.
And you talk about this being a monumental moment, not only for NASCAR, but Austin Dillon, but this is a big moment for those drivers that don't have wins that are vying for those playoff spots. So Martin Truex Jr.'s plus 78, Ty Gibbs plus 18. Bubba Wallace was the last driver on a playoff spot. Now he's moves one spot up. He's plus 3. Chris Buescher, who was outside the playoff spot, the final playoff spot, now is, holding the last playoff spot. Ross Chastain is behind him based on the tiebreaker. How significant is this as we move to Michigan and start to look ahead to the final 3 races in the regular season, what this decision does in the race for the final playoff spots?
It creates a spot, but it doesn't take any pressure away, because there's not enough point separation to feel like I'm going to fill the spot. So yes, a few weeks from now, we'll say, okay, had Austin Dillon been in the playoffs, then this guy would have been out. But none of them know that now. So yes, it does relieve a little bit or create an opportunity to fill the spot, but no one has enough point separation to say, okay, I'm going to take it. So a little tiny bit of pressure off, but almost essentially none. So fast forward, you mentioned making the call on Sunday.
Yeah.
Fast forward to Phoenix. Fast forward to Martinsville. If you see this type of move made, now they can make the call on Sunday. I think now the fact that they took all this and they had a chance to understand it, get all the information, what did it look like? I think now it's easier to make the call quicker. And so sometimes you have to go through this to get to where you want to be. And so ultimately, for this moment, I think taking the time was the right thing to do. But if you see something else that is clearly, doesn't pass the eye test, I think now they are more prepared to make the decision quicker. And by the way, if you're a driver and you know that you have to do some miraculous driver stuff that no one else is willing to do, there's a limit. So this greatly affects the way the playoffs could race as well.
Well, it'll be interesting to see what happens this weekend at Michigan International Speedway for the NASCAR Cup Series, and you can watch the action at 2:30 p.m. Eastern on USA Network.
Hi, I'm Parker Kligerman. For more access like this from Pit Road, be sure to click and subscribe to the Motorsports on NBC YouTube channel.